Namaste. So, as part of Writings of Sri Aurobindo, we continue with the synthesis of yoga. And last week we had touched upon some of the main chapters related to the yoga of divine works. And just to quickly go through the process, consecration is one important element of the yoga works. Whatever works we do not do it for the satisfaction of the ego and desire. We do it as an offering to the divine. So here, work becomes worship. And this includes the whole range of human activities from morning till night, from night till morning. So this is about consecration. By consecrating, we begin to connect ourself and the works that are done through us with the divine. So this is the exchange that begins to take place, which means we shift the motive. The motive is no more to either money or fame or ambition, even to be a yogi. All this is not the aim of yoga. Yogi is a term used for those who are engaged in it. Not like, okay, you are a yogi. That is something for the divine to see what's happening inside, or the person may be aware. And then this consecration naturally leads to surrender. So, without consecration, to leap to surrender is can lead to all kinds of misconceptions that I have surrendered myself to the divine. First, there is a constant referring of all our motives and activities to the divine. Then a stage comes progressively that we completely put ourselves in the hands of the divine so that the divine begins to move us. Now, to engage or talk about surrender without consecration can lead to a gross misunderstanding, and we may start believing I have surrendered myself to the divine. So all that is happening, all the impulses, all the things that are coming to me are all coming from the divine. There can be no further truth than this. That means we remain bound to the lower nature forever, whereas yoga is the royal road towards freedom. And this freedom involves freedom from the ignorance of lower nature, or nature as we understand today, nature of the with its three modes, and which make us move. So we become free from it. So that's the liberation that comes. So along with that, third keyword is sacrifice. Now sacrifice is not in the sense of leaving things. Sacrifice is in the sense of refining things, purifying them. So every activity when it is done as a sacrifice, meaning thereby we uplift. So first the motive has changed. And we have placed ourselves in the hands of the divine. Now whatever work we are doing, and it may include all the different activities in the various fields of knowledge, we do it only to fulfill the divine in us, to satisfy or please the divine in us. Very beautifully, as the mother puts it, that we are here to please Sri Aurobindo. Now, so it becomes an adoration. It becomes a worship. So the works become a means of worship of the divine, and through this worship, by offering these works in that fire of purification, fire of aspiration, we want to uplift it to the highest possible level. And therefore, the works automatically begin to feel the touch of the divine perfection. So that's what is meant in the Gita, yoga karmashu kaushalam. Works are perfect as the divine acts in the world. This is the process, sacrifice. And here Sri Aurobindo puts it in two chapters. Sacrifice is the yajna, and there is the ascent of the sacrifice. And as we engage in this desireless action, freedom from ego, change of motives, works as consecration, surrender, and sacrifice, slowly the outer crust begins to break down, in which we are trapped thinking this is me, a kind of personality in which we live. It breaks down and the deeper psychic entity emerges. So when this deeper psychic entity emerges, there are some signs, and the first sign is it seeks for truth and good and beauty. It's very nature. That's how it is programmed. So wherever there is untruth, it doesn't feel comfortable about it. Wherever there is not good, now good and evil. Evil is something which harms, divides, creates confusion. It feels unhappy about it. Wherever there is lack of love, lack of beauty, lack of largeness, there it tends to shrink from. So psychic being naturally seeks these things, and in the process it begins to seek the company of God lovers. So you will see that as the psychic being emerges, It finds it difficult to stay in the normal world ordinarily constituted of a humanity which is seeking for, the usual aims. So ordinary is not in a pejorative sense, but let's say that in a first stage of development, it is satisfied with these things. It is also seeking these things. But as the consciousness grows and the psychic being emerges, it wants the company of God lovers. This all we all know that, it comes. But then it goes one step further. Now it begins to seek the divine, not just God lovers, not just truth, good and beauty, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, but the divine himself. So the next stage in the development of the psychic being is it seeks the divine in all things, everywhere and in all beings. So that's when it doesn't really matter where you are, but that's a later stage. You are seeking the divine in everything and everywhere. And here Sri Aurobindo reveals to us, this seeking and finding is not just confined to an inner discovery. Meaning thereby I am doing the works, medicine in the medical department, freely prescribing all the toxic and non-toxic substances. And inwardly I am free. Yes, there is the state in which the Karma Yogin reaches. But Sri Aurobindo says, even this light which emerges should show us, give us new directions in every field. So that's how we see in ancient India, creative founts of energies were released. Because the discovery of the psychic being opens us to the divine, the creator's creativity. So that's how, when the psychic being emerges, after a point of time, it begins to show us the divine not just within myself, but within the world, within the workings of the world. The entire divine play progressively begins to get revealed to us, and also how this play can be upgraded. So that's where Sri Aurobindo takes us through the path of sacrifice. And then, of course, we read about the standards of conduct and spiritual freedom. So, this person who is free inwardly, how does he act? Normally, we act according to either social, religious, moral standards of the times, or else we act according to our own personal ethical standards. That's where we see Arjuna's dilemma. He cannot justify the war because socially, morally, religious point of view, family tradition-wise, he finds it wrong. Even his ethical standard says that, well, he has read Gandhiji, Ahimsa Paramo Dharma, and he doesn't know whether he should engage in war or not. So all his personal standards are failing. So that's where we discover that there is a still greater standard. After we have crossed, we can't skip these stages. We can't say that, okay, I'm beyond morality, so I'll be any moral person. No. We have to go through, because morality disciplines the vital nature. But to confuse it or mistake it for the highest spiritual action is incorrect. This is what the Gita also reveals to us, that, well, first duty, first, living for something greater like an ideal, and then we have to go beyond. This suddenly reminds me of, how one can limit things. There is a notice for a movie which is going to come, Vande Mataram. And I must say that I was so surprised to read toward the end something which summarizes Sri Aurobindo's thought. Though it is not mentioned in the context. For Sri Aurobindo, it's put in inverted commas, country first, humanity afterwards, the rest nowhere. This is absurd. Anybody who has read Sri Aurobindo even a little, and to find such a notice put right inside, I must say very freely and frankly, I was very surprised that who could even imagine this. So it's important to understand that country first, humanity first is not the core of any yoga. Any yoga, leave aside Sri Aurobindo's yoga. The core is divinity first. And everything else flows from divinity. Humanity for the sake of divinity, country for the sake of divinity. So we must, because I just saw it, I thought, it should go as a kind of corrective, whatever be the consciousness behind it, but it can give a very mistaken understanding, especially many people who may not be even aware what Sri Aurobindo represents. So the moment highest spiritual freedom is when we are simply obedient to the divine will. That's what matters. This is what Sri Aurobindo's core teaching is. Be moved by the divine will as a leaf is driven. I'm a leaf in the, driven by the breath of the Lord. This should be the state. And then, of course, the supreme will where Sri Aurobindo reveals how this supreme will comes to us in the form of a deep enthusiasm. It can descend from above. It can electrify our entire being, charge us. It may inspire us. Intuitively, it may come as a flash, so many ways. Or it can come as a gentle, small, little voice from inside. It can reveal itself in many ways. And as we begin to live more and more in it, there is that growing equality. So first, equality starts in the very beginning of yoga. But first equality is on the surface nature, all the surface contacts of life. Then the equality must deepen into the sense of all kinds of other identities. But it can become still deeper, and in the deepest stage of equality, there is nothing else but the divine consciousness which is fully occupying us. And then, of course, the two chapters, the three modes of nature, we'll have occasion to talk about it still further in the yoga of integral knowledge, and the master of the work. This is something amazing. This may sound that, okay, the master of the work, what is so special about it? Why it's important? Because generally we think that the divine is like a silent witness knowledge seated above. As far as works are concerned, this is a prakriti, this is ignorance. But he is the master of the work, meaning thereby he is the one who is impelling all things into motion. Shri Krishna hints at it when he says karma, visarga. He is the one who releases the karma. And then everything goes back to him. So all action belongs to the divine, and it originates in the divine and goes back to the divine. But there is something which happens in between, and that distortion we have to remove. That distortion comes from the vital nature, desire, from the mental nature, through egoism, from the physical nature, through obscurity and ignorance and tamas. So when we remove these three modes which are interfering with the direct action of the divine, then the supreme will expresses itself, and the master of work reveals himself to us. Then we realize that we were not even an instrument. We start with, I am an instrument of the divine. Then we discovered it's the force that is working. So after the instrument, the worker, then we realize that it is nature which is working. And then we realize that no, there is the master who is, even beyond nature. I remember, I'll just share a small little incident of in that kind of wisdom that people had when India was deeply rooted in the sense of the sacred and divinity. Like a typical young teenager, 14, 15, arguing, nature hai, this nature, what is there to bring in divine? Because this idea that divine is there at the end only for mukti made no sense. This impersonal witness, you feel there is no real need of an impersonal witness who is watching over us. So I made my mom put me to my Mamaji, who used to be very deeply into Ramayana and all this. So I still remember he was reading the Ramayana, and I told him, what is the point of, divine who is there as somewhere as a witness? While earth is struggling, there is so much suffering. Then he smiled and gave me a very interesting answer. I said, all this is nature. Okay, you can be free from nature, but that's it. So suddenly he smiles and says, हाँ बेटा, ये तो सच है प्रकृति की बात, लेकिन प्रकृति के स्वामी को भी एक दिन तुम जानोगे. You will know that there is the master of nature. This was like, suddenly for a 15-year-old to hear these words, deepest wisdom, that there is nature, but there is also the master of nature from whom nature emerges. So it is the Lord's Maya. Maya is not some kind of freak which has come into this world. The Lord's Maya. And we have often spoken about it. There is the Vidyamai Maya, where the Lord is fully conscious and possesses Maya. Whereas Avidyamai, where it's in its operations in us, where we are no more conscious of the Lord. And the typical analogy is that supposing there is a gangrene in finger or a toe, and the person has to go through a surgery. Now look at the two standpoints. The person knows that this finger has to be removed or a reconstructive surgery has to be done. Let's talk positive. Why remove? Reconstructive surgery. So now you have taken a decision. The toe may not understand this at all. Toe is not conscious. It's in avidya. According to it, cool, whatever is happening to me, why this? I am being subjected to this. Whereas the self, the being, even the limited human being, the egoistic human being, knows that this is necessary for the total health of my body. So this is the Vidyamai which knows the part and the whole, and this is a Vidya where the part knows only itself but knows not the whole. So all this Sri Aurobindo reveals to us, and then comes this chapter, which I'll just read a few very inspiring, uplifting words from this, the divine work. Meaning thereby, a person who is free, why would he need to work? Now this is a very ancient puzzle, not so ancient if you look at it very from a common sense point of view, but let me put it like an image. So the image is, most people say that, well, works are necessary to reach the house of the Lord. So while we are going on the path, supposing we want to meet our divine master, and the divine master is in a mansion, we have heard from somebody he lives out there. So suddenly one day we are seized by this idea, either impelled by the shocks of life that let's go there, that's the only place worth going, or attracted by the flute which we hear from time to time, कि ये कहाँ से आ रहा है, where is this coming from? Whatever be the origin, we start undertaking the journey. So journey is work. You can't walking means you can't stay still and say, even thought is a kind of activity. So you begin to walk the path. So works are leading you. Now in that process, you have to make sure you are not distracted. Desire comes as a distraction. You have climbed only a few steps and desire says, हमारी दुकान इधर है, भगवान की दुकान, God is found here. And if you come here, you will be a blessed person who will be forever redeemed, whatever it is. So we are drawn towards it. So again, what is happening is various kinds of desires, lures are distracting us. So in the path of works, we have to get rid of it. Or if you go a little further, then somebody says, Bhagwan ke paas jaake kya milega? I'll make you somebody great, lures, attractions of the ego, spiritual ambitions, that you will become a yogi, all kinds of things, which may again distract us. Various opinions, ideas in which we have captured God, various formulas. So in the path of works, we have to get rid of all this. Then now what happens when you reach the mansion of the Lord? Now comes the issue. You have met the Lord. Then what happens? Chhap tilak sab chini, mujhse naina milaye. How can you remember yourself? Even your ego self, I was that person. By the time you are changed, in fact, you begin to see that there is so much similarity, not in that self and this one, but in your true self. Because by then, desire and ego and all this has stripped you bare. So when you strip yourself bare of all these things, you discover there is no fundamental difference. So then you have arrived at the destination. You have become one with the divine. So why should you work? Now this is the question that is raised. So now the thing is that, well, if I am an individual taking my journey, then I may say that, okay, I have arrived. But if we understand that all these journeys are nothing else but the journey of the one divine, the moment we understand there is no other but He who is the master of the work and this entire creation is His progressive manifestation, then what prevents a soul which is free and realized to return back? Because maybe God will give a nice pat on our back and say, good, you have understood. But now, my child, go back, be among the ignorant person, be as the common folk, and carry them together. You have heard the flute, they have not. So be the flute among men, be the warrior for the great consummation in humanity. So this is where we have to understand a liberated person is no more bound when he enters into works. But he is no more working under the impulsion of desire, but by something deeper which emerges from inside, either as a swadharma or else by a kind of divine enthusiasm. So this is a very powerful, one of my favorite, synthesis of yoga, the divine work. The desire of personal salvation, however high its form, is an outcome of ego. I am saved. As if I was the only fellow in this world. Everyone is myself. When you discover you are the divine, it's not like I, that I. Everyone is yourself. So how can you rest content? There's that line in Savitri, my spirit's liberty I ask for all. It rests on the idea of our own individuality and its desire for its personal good or welfare. This idea of an individual mukti. Its longing for a release from suffering, or its cry for the extinction of the trouble of becoming, and makes that the supreme aim of our existence. This may be a starting point, okay? People are pushed from here and there, there is so much suffering. We may start like that. Let me find a nice little place, and that place is the divine, supreme shelter. What we don't realize when we find that space, we are no more that. Or rather, to put it paradoxically, we are no more that, we have become that. When we reach there, we discover, Arey, I am that one. So, we discover that. To rise beyond the desire of personal salvation is necessary for the complete rejection of this basis of ego. And I think in India, this is a teaching which must go from every corner. Because still I see that in the name of spirituality, there's so much talk about personal moksha, individual liberation, not realizing this is a subtle form of ego. It is this that has led to the downfall of India. From those days where men like Bhishma, of course Shri Krishna, Arjuna, all yogis engaged in the world. They were not world-shunning ascetics, and they are the ones whom we remember. Does anyone remember who were the ascetics in the time of Mahabharata? Shri Krishna, who took to sannyas and went into some Himalaya, God knows, for 17 years, asking for. Nobody remembers. Okay, they were there, they were lost. Not that there is anything wrong with that, but it's a limited aim. It is not the supreme aim. That's all we should remember. If we seek the divine, it should be for the sake of the divine and for nothing else. Because that is the supreme call of a being, the deepest truth of the spirit. Isn't that also the truth of all love? When we want to seek, is it that when I meet, I will have this to my advantage? No. Giving yourself completely. The pursuit of liberation, of the soul's freedom, of the realization of a true and highest self, of union with the divine is justified only because it is the highest law of our nature. Because it is the attraction of that which is lower in us to that which is highest. Because it is the divine will in us. That is its sufficient justification and its one truest reason. All other motives are excrescences, minor or incidental truths, or useful lures which the soul must abandon the moment their utility has passed and the state of oneness with the Supreme and with all beings has become our normal consciousness, and the bliss of that state our spiritual atmosphere. I need to put that analogy which I keep hearing from different sources. We are like a wave that lapses into the ocean. Okay, then it becomes the ocean. It's not extinction. It springs up in 100,000 waves to catch the moon. It doesn't extinguish, it separate self-extinguishes. It no more identifies itself with one wave, but becomes 1,000, 10,000 multiple waves cutting through all barriers of time and space. This is what happens to a yogi on the path. So he says that often we see this desire for liberation, salvation, overcome by another attraction, which belongs to the higher turn of our nature and which indicates the essential character of the action the liberated soul must pursue. It is that which is implied in the great legend of the Amitabha Buddha. In Mahayana we see this. Amitabha Buddha, who turned away, or Maitreyi Buddha is also called, who turned away when his spirit was on the threshold of nirvana and took the vow never to cross it, while a single being remained in the sorrow and the ignorance. And the other one, my favorite prayer, it is that which underlies the sublime verse of the Bhagavad Purana. I desire not the supreme state with all its 8 siddhis, nor the cessation of rebirth. May I assume the sorrow of all creatures who suffer and enter into them, so that they may be made free from grief. What a vast, bold, only for the strong, not with souls weary and sick and tired. Let the sorrow of all beings enter into me. That is called Shivatva. I desire not the supreme state. It is that which inspires a remarkable passage in a letter of Swami Vivekananda, this toward the end, his letter. I have lost all wish for my salvation, wrote the great Vedantin. May I be born again and suffer thousands of miseries, so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God, the wicked, my God, The miserable, my God, the poor of all races, of all species, is the special object of my worship. He who is the high and low, the saint and the sinner, the God and the worm, him worship, the visible, the knowable, the real. We must understand he is speaking from that point after having realized that. We should not ignorantly mistranslate. But look at that there is something beyond nirvana. There is something beyond salvation, personal salvation. There is something beyond mukti. And this we must understand. Even in traditional yoga, transformation comes still later. But something beyond that. Break all idols, break all other idols. Sri Aurobindo speaks about it in a very different way. He speaks about what is going to come is the religion of humanity, but he puts a spiritual word. Spiritual religion of humanity is going to be the religion of the future. Because ultimately it is the emancipation, the great becoming which is important. So, break all other idols in whom there is neither past life nor future birth, nor death nor going nor coming, in whom we always have been and always will be one. Him worship, break all other idols. He was an iconoclast. There is a phase of life when one has to go through that. The last two sentences contain indeed the whole gist of the matter. And then Sri Aurobindo says, the true salvation or the true freedom from the chain of rebirth is not the rejection of terrestrial life or the individual's escape by a spiritual self-annihilation. How can it be freedom? How can freedom be determined by any condition, including cessation of rebirth? If you have put a condition, it's no more freedom by definition, just pure logic. Freedom means even in bonds and chains you are free. So that's what he reminds us. Even as the true renunciation is not the mere physical abandonment of family and society, it is the inner identification with the divine in whom there is no limitation of past life and future birth, but instead the eternal existence of the unborn soul. He who is free inwardly, even doing actions. Akarma, the state where even while naishkarmya, one is doing nothing. If you truly ask such a person that, what are you doing? He was nothing. He will not recount a list of, 30 things. Because it's not something to be said. It is actually the state that it's just impossible. So one knows that it is the divine who is doing. So this is the state of the liberation that comes through the yoga works. Equally, even if he assumes 100 times the body, he is free from any chain of birth or mechanical wheel of existence, since he lives in the unborn and undying spirit and not in the life of the body. Once free, forever free. Even when you enter the chain, well, when you are a child, of course, bodily limitations are there, but very soon you become conscious, maybe even before birth, somewhere, that you are coming for a particular purpose, everything, because now you are a free person, free being. See how Sri Aurobindo spoke about Ma, that she is born free. Mira is born free. You are conscious, something will keep prompting you and moving you. Of course, the full realization, as the mother says, develops as the mind develops, then you give it words. But deep inside it is there that you have come with a particular purpose. So that's how it will be. 100 births will not bind you. Therefore, attachment to the escape from rebirth is one of the idols. See how idols are not just physical forms, but the images and conceptions that the mind creates. That is the idol, which fools started breaking outer idols and says idolaters. You have formed an idol in your mind, which is a very dark idol. Idol is not something outside. Outside, that idol is only a representation. You may break 100 idols. You are just being foolish. But basically, idol is in the mind. The truth of that idol will always remain. So, he says, of course, that idol has its own meaning in the ascending stair of humanity, and therefore it must stay. But the true idolatry is inside. So he says, a divine work remains for him in the universe, For the sadhak of the integral yoga must break and cast away from him all this idea that I will be free from rebirth. That work, what will be the work of the person who is free? That work cannot be fixed by any mind made rule or human standard. For his consciousness has moved away from human law and limits and passed into the divine liberty. What a liberating! This sentence itself makes you free into the vastness. And then he says something very powerful. Away from government by the external and transient into the self-rule of the inner and eternal. Away from the binding forms of the finite into the free self-determination of the infinite. And now comes the most powerful of all, among the most powerful of the Mahavakyas. Very difficult for the bound humanity to even conceive. However, he lives and acts, says the Gita, he lives and acts in me. Mark the words. However, you cannot understand by any external yardstick, standard, a person who is free. And the mother gives a very interesting example. Of course, we have the story of Raja Janak, when Narad goes and he is deceived, and Sri Aurobindo is immortalized in his aphorism. Even before Janak, even Narad, the sage, he was perplexed. He could never understand. So, of course, Swami Vivekananda took that example of Janak, that there is one Janak. He accepted, but he says, sannyas is ultimate. But Sri Aurobindo says, no, Janak is a lineage of kings. So the mother says how our mental conceptions can interfere in our seeking of the divine. And she says, it's very early, I think, volume 3 itself, that a man comes and he walks into some place, meeting someone whom he believed that, is the divine. But when he saw him, his dress, his appearances, he thought, how can divine be like this? And he walked away. He said, this is the problem. That our mental conceptions through which we are fooled constantly. Divine ki marji hai. Who are we to tell him what he should wear and how he should be? But behind everything that he does, it's not a absurdity, not a chaotic action, but a supreme self-determination through which the action takes place. The rules which the intellect of man lay down cannot apply to the liberated soul. By the external criteria and test which their mental association and prejudgments prescribe, such a one cannot be judged. He is outside the narrow jurisdiction of these fallible tribunals. It is immaterial whether he wears the garb of the ascetic or lives the full life of the householder. Whether he spends his days in what men call holy works or in the many-sided activities of the world. Whether he devotes himself to the direct leading of men to the light like Buddha, Christ or Shankara, or governs kingdoms like Janak, or stands before men like Sri Krishna as a politician or a leader of armies, what he eats or drinks, what are his habits or his pursuits, whether he fails or succeeds, whether his work be one of construction or of destruction, whether he supports or restores an old order or labors to replace it by a new, whether his associates are those whom men delight to honor, or those whom their sense of superior righteousness outcasts and reprobates, whether his life and deeds are approved by his contemporaries, or he is condemned as a misleader of men and a fomenter of religious, moral or social heresies. Of course, sometimes these truths are conjured in one-liners. Jaat na pucho sadhu ki, puch lijyo gyan. Just see whether he is a knower or not. And you will know it if you are a seeker. You cannot know whether somebody is a knower or not by any external criteria. Because many people try to copy that. So there are people who like to wear only dhoti, thinking that they will become like Sri Aurobindo, even go bare-bodied. So you'll only catch a cold in all likelihood. Let there be only one Sri Aurobindo in the universe. Or sometimes they shut themselves inside a room for a few years. They will eat very little, hardly smile, because to smile is unyogic. And the mother says, laugh with the Lord. And mother's laughter. So this is how we have this idea. I don't want to speak about color. I have spoken enough about it. All white colored. So none of this applies. You may or you may not. It doesn't matter. Either ways. And so he says his real life is within. And this is its description, that he lives, moves and acts in God, in the divine, in the infinite. Who will judge that except the divine? And perhaps the person if he is sincere enough. But there may be no person anymore. The way we understand it. So this is the great peak towards which the yoga of divine works take us. Anything less is simply preparation on the way. And the last chapter, which we had just touched upon in the Yoga of Divine Works, is Supermind. Suddenly Sri Aurobindo brings Supermind in the Yoga of Works. So several people ask, what is Supermind? So this is an occasion to read one of the ways Sri Aurobindo describes. Several ways he describes. So I'll just read and then we will talk a little bit about it. But first, course correction. Because many people are drawn to the yoga, I'll be transformed. I won't need any cream to look golden. Why my body, even the dress I will wear will become golden? If I wear a yellow dress, I am closer to the supramental. It's nice to wear nice dress in whatever color suits. That's a different thing altogether. But we have this idea, many people are attracted by the power, by the idea of becoming greater than ordinary humanity. Not realizing by the time you reach there, you will discover the same self in the entire humanity. This idea that I am superior has to vanish because it cannot be sustained. Can the divine say, I am superior to you guys? He can only say, I have become you guys. The buck is with me. It begins and ends with me. But yes, you can do my work if you like. So here he says, it is a mistake. This is the last chapter on the Yoga of Divine Works. It is a mistake to think, as many are apt to think, that the object of a supramental yoga is to arrive at a mighty magnificence of supermanhood. Thought reading, miracle, a divine power and greatness, the self-fulfillment of a magnified individual personality. So when people come and ask, where is the supramental specimen? You should say, there is not one supramental specimen, there are many. And then add quietly, in the making. Where will I find them? You find. It's your question, your job. Supramental specimen is not going to come and say, I'm a Superman, do you see? And start showing miracles to convince you. He will just say, like Vivekananda, that I can't cross this river, I am waiting for the boatman. How can you bind? So this is where he says, that's not what. This is a false and disastrous conception. Many people nurture this idea, especially who come from the Western context. Sometimes you find in Aurobindo, we are here to become Superman. First, become man, human being. Superman will come later. Superman comes when you have even forgotten who you are. It's only the divine who has the factory of supermanhood. So, says, this is a false and disastrous conception. Disastrous because it is likely to raise the pride, vanity and ambition of the Rajasic vital mind in us. People even begin to imitate. Even their tone, everything begins to change, not in a spontaneous way, but in an artificial way. They begin to behave in certain ways, to impress, show, sham. So, if not overpassed and overcome, must lead to spiritual downfall. गए थे सुपरामेंटल बनने, आए inframental बन के. We went to become supramental, we came back inframental and infradental. Without even title. And then we say, why did you do this to me, Lord? At least you should have kept up my facial appearances. If not supramental being, I should have looked a very smart human being. He says, because you were trying to become over smart. I have removed all this. Now you may become wise. You have a chance to become wise. So he reminds us that these things, vanity, pride, They are elementary things of spiritual life. False because it is an egoistic conception, and the first condition of the supramental change is to get rid of the ego. There is no Dr. Alok Pandey becoming supramental. If he still has this Dr. Alok Pandey, I mean anybody's name, then there is no supramental. And there are people who are so attached to their name, surname, to their titles, what all they have done. My gosh, every time I hear biodata, my own, I feel किसकी बात कर रहे हैं? क्यों कर रहे हैं? I can't say there, please stop it. Whose thing they are speaking? There is no identification. Honestly, that he authored book, given talks, God knows whom or what they are speaking about. This identification vanishes as one progresses on the path. But people they do out of love. It is most dangerous for the active and dynamic nature of the man of will and works, which can easily be led away by the pursuit of power. This is the problem of supramental power. Power comes inevitably by the supramental change. Who won't have when the divine is standing by you? Whatever you say, whatever you do, somewhere he knows it. He will see to it. When Arjuna gives a promise, by tomorrow I am going to kill Jayadratha, Krishna has heard it. Now it's his business to make sure it happens. He has said something impossible. Where was the power in Arjuna to ensure that within one day, that too guarded by all these great ones who had not yet died? So this is where the power comes from. It is not one's own power. And even this idea that this is my power is a non-starter. Elementary practice of Karma Yoga reveals there is nothing like personal power. Even science teaches us there is nothing like your force. It is one force which is circulating in the universe. And it picks up instrument, channels, uses this means, that means. It is a necessary condition for a perfect action, freedom from ego. But it is the divine Shakti that comes and takes up the nature and the life, the power of the one acting through the spiritual individual. It is not an aggrandizement of the personal force, not the last crowning fulfillment of the separative mental and vital ego. Self-fulfillment is a result of the yoga, but its aim is not the greatness of the individual. I hear terms like integral yogi hai. Yes, what does it mean? Even the word sadhak sounds so preposterous. And then to add to that foolishness, we add senior sadhak and still more advanced sadhak. So, why? Simply because somebody is staying in the Sri Aurobindo ashram. What is sadhana or yoga advancement got to do with any of this? It is a possibility, an opportunity. But to start believing that just because you are staying near the feet of Rama, you become a Hanuman. No. So this is where he reminds us, the sole aim is a spiritual perfection, a finding of the true self and a union with the divine by putting on the divine consciousness. And now comes the supramental consciousness, what it is. In the supramental consciousness, on the level of the supramental existence, the integration becomes consummate. So what is the integration? If you go by the path of works, works is a very wide field. By its nature, it includes knowledge and will and love. But supposing we go through the traditional path of knowledge, then there is a tendency to drop off the work. One likes to withdraw more and more, sitting in meditation, going towards samadhi. Or if you take the path of love, bhakti, then there is more and more the tendency to look down upon knowledge, on works, and all this tends to become subordinate. And not only this, there are different sides and aspects of the being which needs their own consummation. So there is the vital nature, there is passion, there is power, there is wisdom, there is perfection in every detail of life. There is the spirit of, or a seeking for beauty and harmony, for love, for delight, for peace. All these, generally in yoga, we pursue one aspect and arrive at that aspect of the divine And well, that is liberative, no doubt, because if you touch one aspect, you have arrived at some absolute of the divine, absolute peace. You can withdraw into samadhi. But in supermind, all these aspects, infinite aspects, are together in a harmonious embrace. This is the first definition of the supermind. Definition means a way of saying supermind is the creator in all his splendor, effulgence, where all the different aspects in creation they are all scattered. Somebody may be strong, the other person is very sweet. But sweetness and strength together in the supramental. Somebody is very happy, not that happy has anything to do with delight. Full of delight, somebody is in peace. But in supermind, peace and delight are together, interwoven with each other. Similarly, harmony, beauty, all these different aspects come together. Wisdom, justice, compassion, things which seem contradictory. In the supermind, they are all together in a beautiful concord, harmonious concord. Not woven together means that now, the divine says in the orchestra, let the tabla start, and then the harmonium starts. All of them are in a beautiful concord. So that's the supramental existence. First thing is the divine in all his splendor, harmoniously weaving all the different infinite anant gun of the divine, not nirgun sagun, but all of them, even the nirgun aspect, the sagun, they are all interwoven. The impersonal Brahman and the suprapersonal Sachidanand, all of them are interwoven. If you enter the supermind, there is no antagonism between Sachidanand Brahm and the creation. All of them are woven together as one single. The perfection of the self and the dynamic nature rise each to its absolute of itself and all to their perfect harmony and fusion with each other to a divine integrality, a divine perfection. Let's take this example again of the wave and the sea. Looking at a wave which will lapse is one kind of ignorance. Looking at the sea, sans the waves, is another kind of ignorance. Are the waves and the sea different? Where will we find this truth? Neither in the sea nor in the waves, but we have to go to the third aspect, the being of the ocean. Ask that being that, sir, what are these waves? Is it not some Maya? You say, that is myself. Ask the being of the ocean, what is this ocean? You say, myself. What are these multiple creatures in the ocean? I have brought them forth. Why have you brought them forth? For the delight of myself. They live and die within, and all this is myself. This is the great supramental experience. That's what is hinted in Isha Upanishad. That's why the mother says when Sri Aurobindo sees the one Vasudev everywhere, it is a supramental oneness. Because it is one in both static and dynamic aspects. For the supermind is a truth consciousness. All this can become one only in the consciousness of truth, and it is understood it is not my truth, your truth, not legal truth, moral truth, religious truth, formulas of truth. None of this. It is truth because it is the self-vision of the Supreme in what seems like a otherness of self. It is his self-vision. I know what's happening to my finger, nobody else can know. So that is the awareness of the self in all things. What I may know, others may know, things is all about how they look outside. So that, of course, we'll touch in the yoga of knowledge. For the supermind is a truth consciousness in which the divine reality fully manifested. So this is important. It is not divine reality which excludes manifestation. If you go into Sachidanand Brahm, you exclude manifestation. If you go into Brahma Nirvana, you exclude manifestation. In the supermind, the unmanifest and the manifest come together. That is the hint in the Gita. Vyaktoham, avyaktoham. Sri Krishna knocks at the door of the supermind and says, no, I have to come as Sri Aurobindo. I shouldn't exceed the brief. Arjuna will be too much flooded. Then he'll be totally confused. What are you meaning, Lord? So quietly he just mentions. So that's how in the supermind there is the full manifestation. No longer works with the instrumentation of the ignorance A truth of status of being which is absolute becomes dynamic in a truth of energy and activity of the being which is self existent and perfect. There is no antagonism between Ishvara and Shakti, between creation and the creator. Because it's the creator who is flowing into the creation. Of course, creation will always be limited, but yet it will be the creator who is constantly unfolding himself to the great epic called human life or the existence, creation of earth. So, this is how we find this truth is revealed in the supermind. Then, in the supermind, every movement, there is a movement of the self aware truth of divine being, and every part is in entire harmony with the whole. Self aware truth of the divine being. So, there is this. Whatever action is there, there is no trace of unconsciousness, no trace of error, because not only it is not unconsciousness, but climbing through grades of consciousness, every action is impelled by the supreme consciousness. So there can be no error. We may think that world is an error, but to the supermind, he'll say, picture abhi baki hai. You are too quick and jumping to conclusion. As mother says, for the human consciousness, the divine is too slow. For the divine, man is too slow in responding. But then she says, but to the supreme wisdom, all is perfect just as it should be. In that vision, you see all the steps, all the journey. So every movement and every divine being and every part is in entire harmony with the whole. So when an action is done, all its repercussions with all the other coordinates are taken into consideration. This is the beauty. When we act, we think only about this little individual. But when the divine acts, he acts not only upon that person, but everything else that is connected. That's why that is the beauty of the supramental avatar, and the mother speaks about it. Automatically, because that action is flawless for this very reason. Even the most limited and finite action is in the truth consciousness, a movement of the eternal and infinite, and partakes of the inherent absoluteness and perfection of the eternal and infinite. That's what I sometimes, when Sri Aurobindo, when in the morning, so what was the time? I think it was afternoon, when the mother would go and meet Sri Aurobindo, and they would either talk or they would understand the big cosmic problem of sadhaks. And Sri Aurobindo will make a cup of tea for the mother. Or when the mother combs Sri Aurobindo's hairs. You know what is? We have read about it, no? Apart from the beauty of that action, hairs. There is a vision Sri Aurobindo mother describes where Sri Aurobindo picks up 3 combs and puts in his hair. He says, he was saying that I have adopted your conceptions. Whatever you create, I have received it and accepted it, sanctioned it. What is combing? He's dressing up. He's ready. The Lord accepts whatever way the divine Shakti dresses him up. Look at the beauty of it. It's not just a gesture. It's a divine gesture. Even the smallest action, how the mother would, flowers which people will give her on the way, she will come and place it at Sri Aurobindo's feet. It is the divine Shakti bringing everything and placing at the Lord's feet. How in every little detail this action works. So it's not like some things are important and others are not important. An ascent into the supramental truth not only raises our spiritual and essential consciousness to that height, but brings about a descent of this light and truth into all our being and all our parts of nature. All then becomes part of the divine truth, from the highest to the lowest, from the heights to the abyss. An element and means of the supreme union and oneness. This ascent and descent must be therefore an ultimate aim of this yoga. Why Sri Aurobindo takes a separate chapter for this? Because in traditional karma yoga or in the Gita, this part is not there. It stops with liberation through works, But Sri Aurobindo brings this element of the supramental change, which also through works we can arrive at. This is taking the entire yoga of the Gita one step further. The doors which Sri Krishna knocked but did not open, Sri Aurobindo opens and lets us enter into it, and lets that enter and invade us and transform us. Namaste.